Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Why the New Travel Rules and Immigration System Matter to Manufacturers, hosted by Make UK in partnership with Ceridian, following our series of 4 fact cards on the same theme. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items to note. All attendees are in listening mode only, and only the panelists' video are visible. If you wish to engage with the panelists, you can do so by typing your question into the Q&A box in the Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. Make UK will be moderating those questions, and we will utilize time within the discussion and at the end of the webinar for response. We are not monitoring the chat function for questions and engagement. And finally, once I hand over to the panelists, please remember that today's webinar is being recorded. I'm pleased to introduce our panel, starting with our chair and co-author of the fact cards, Tim Thomas, Director of Labour Market and International Mobility Policy. Joining him on the panel are Alice Tranter, Principal Policy Advisor for Labour Market and International Mobility from Make UK, Adam Aguzzi, Senior Principal Industry Advisor from Ceridian, and Dave Benstead, HR and Operational Director, Diodes Semiconductors. And now over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Carolee. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists for taking the time out to join the panel today and give their views of international mobility issues between the UK and the EU. It's a well-timed webinar. Lots going on at the moment. As Carolee said, we're going to take as many questions as possible at the end. Anything we don't get to, we will follow up after today. If you bear with me, I'm now going to pop up a PowerPoint presentation. To start with, you'll be hearing from myself and Alice on behalf of Make UK. We'll take you through a range of issues regarding international mobility between the UK and the EU and vice versa. We'll look ahead to next year as well. And then we'll turn to Dave Benstead. Now, Dave is an HR Operational Director at Diodes Semiconductors, as you've heard. And we'll turn to Adam Aguzzi from Ceridian, who will give his view on the issues of international mobility and how Ceridian might be able to help you. And at the end, then we'll look to take some questions. In the middle, we've got some polling questions. So we want to know what you think about the issues we're raising and how we can help you any further. So if you just bear with me one moment, I will share my screen. And you get an opportunity to see everything that we're about to take you through. So hopefully now everyone can see my screen. Opening slide, we're going to deal with all EU business travel issues. Hopefully you've seen those fact cards that Alice has written on behalf of Make UK. They'll give you an introduction, but today we're going to take you through an overview of the current rules for UK workers travelling to the EU, what they mean for you, what you need to do to comply with those rules. Notice those are the current rules. Social security rules going forward and now, and what they mean and what you need to do. We'll look ahead to 2021, what's going to happen then, and how the future UK rules are going to affect you. We'll turn to our panel, Alice and Dave and Alex, and they'll give their take on what's happening. And then we'll look at how we can help you going forward and your questions. These are a set of rules we're going to describe in a moment. That you may or may not be familiar with. The fact cards take you through little bits and pieces of them. We'll take you through the difference between what's a business visitor to the EU and what that means, and what a posted worker is. We're going to look ahead to 2021, the UK's future immigration system. That's the new points-based system that's coming in, and what that means for people coming into the UK, whether they're working or they're visitors from the 1st of January of next year. And then, as I say, we'll turn to our panel, and our panel will help you. And as I say, in the middle, we've got some polling questions. So always interested to find out what you know about these rules, how we can help you going forward, and what they do to affect your business. These are a set of rules we're covering today that perhaps aren't so well known in the UK, but as we come to the end of 2020, the end of a transitional period where the UK has left the EU and is looking ahead to a new immigration system, then we'll give you some hints and tips of what's going to happen next year and for how these rules are going to affect you going forward. It's a good time to be looking at these issues now. Clearly, we're in November, not much time left of those transitional arrangements between the UK and the EU. And all I would say at this point, setting the scene for you, is whatever's going to happen next year, knowing these rules, knowing how to comply with these rules, looking at your business now, doing some data mapping that Alice will take you through, is really vital to that prep work for whatever is going to happen in 2021 and beyond. So that's a bit of scene setting. We know, for example, that over 90% of Make UK members do have these business trips and these business visitors that are going through to the EU. So it's highly topical and highly important to all Make UK members and manufacturers. So what are we going to cover today? We'll cover short-term business visitors. Alice will tell you in a little more detail what that is. We'll cover things called posted workers, broadly workers going into the EU to provide services, and Alice will explain what that means. Freedom of movement and why this is different. So we're going to cover the future UK immigration system and what that means. Freedom of movement is ending, is finishing. That's going to be replaced by a new immigration system. And again, we'll take you through some of the details there. And social security rules and why that's important, and why there's some administration, some rules around that you need to be aware of. So that's a bit of a scene set. That's what we're going to be covering today. At this point, I'm going to pause. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Alice, and Alice will take you through what's a short-term business visitor, what does that mean for you, and then she'll explain what a posted worker is and what you need to do to comply with some technical EU rules that apply now, but are very likely to apply in a similar form next year as well. So I will pause there. Alice, can I hand over to you at that point to take us through short-term business visitors and posted workers?
Thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone here today. So as Tim explained, I will talk you through the different type of worker who will be traveling to the EU. It does affect broadly the entire economy in the UK, but of course we're looking at the manufacturing sector today from a UK's perspective. And we'll hear from Dave later on how his experience has been with his company. So the reason why we're splitting the two types of workers is because effectively there are rules affect either a visitor or someone who actually goes and provides a service. So Tim, if we go to the next slide, I'll then tell everyone why being a business visitor is very important and different from a posted worker. So what is a business visitor? It's essentially what it says on the tin: you are there to visit, not work. And you're not intending to settle permanently either. We're talking about the temporary movement of workers, those who temporarily visit the EU for business purposes, whether it's a meeting like a visitor, or you're actually providing a service and you come back again quite shortly. This is not permanent settlement. This has nothing to do with immigration. This is mobility, and is a very, very big part of the economy. I think services to the EU, people-wise, is worth about 90 billion to our economy. So huge area. And it's really important we get sort of on top of the rules. So the definition of a business visitor is you are visiting for a meeting or a conference or a trade fair or similar ilk, training, things like that. So you're an attendee, really. And you're definitely not providing this service to a customer or your client, either in any country that you have a contract with to provide work. This is not to do with the length of the stay. If you're not providing service, you are a business visitor. Business trips can be from 1 day to 3 months, technically, if you're not working. So this is nothing about period of time that you're there. Compliance with EU business travel rules changed in July this year to increase enforcement. A little bit of background is that for the past 25 years, there have been rules about how we travel to the EU to conduct business. However, over time, they've become lesser known about and compliance has gone down the drain. The EU decided that things needed to change. 2 years ago, they made some amendments to the rules, which I'll go through now. And most importantly, they've increased enforcement. So now we're starting to see a huge crackdown from the authorities in local member states over whether we're complying. It's not just the UK, this is member state wide. So these rules are a directive that binds all member states to comply by them. So Unfortunately, these will affect business visitors. Even though you're not working, there are still some obligations a business visitor needs to do. So if you are going to a meeting or a conference or a trade fair or training in any member state, you must adhere by the basic rules, which broadly include the advance notification of arrival, notifying the country in advance, essentially, before you go, documentation or proof, so your conference invitation, travel receipts or bookings, and then crucially, your proof of your national insurance payment in the UK, which is in the format of an A1 form issued to the HMRC, but I will go through that in more detail. So moving on. Posted workers, slightly different to a business visitor. There are more rules associated with it, but because you're providing a service, it's highly sort of regulated in that sense to protect the rights of that worker, both here in the UK and when you're abroad. And there's a hardcore set of rules that employers should have been abiding by, although awareness is low. But due to increased enforcement now, it's really important we take notice of what the rules are, as they will affect us, and there are awful liabilities associated if we do not comply, such as fines. So going through what a posted worker is. So again, a worker travelling from one EU member state to another to provide a service. The service can be provided for another company or your own, and it does include secondments, so intra-company transfers as well. So anyone who is working for your company in this country going to another member state, even if they're a secondee. You are not there solely for meetings and conferences, and it does include agency workers as well. So providing service could be installing machinery, repairing it, inspecting it, technicians, engineers, that sort of thing. You are generating income and revenue for your employer, and there are a few more rules you have to comply with if that is the case. A bit of background. So the rules I'm adhering to are a big rule book, essentially called the Posted Workers Directive. It's been around for a long time, as I said. However, there were changes in July this year, and it does affect workers providing services in the EU. And the changes will include the rate of pay you pay your worker when they go there, the duration of time they're allowed to be there, and so on. So I will go through that on the next slide. So it's now known as a reform directive because it's been amended. And as I said, the new rules, which essentially we need to be aware of and comply with, are remuneration, duration of posting, subcontracting chain liability, and use of temping agencies. And we put these questions in here because very often when I speak to members and when we support them, they don't quite believe that these changes will affect them because workers, or employers rather, have been allowed to go to the EU with no problem at all. They haven't been aware of these rules, and why would it affect them now? And it will apply to all member states we send workers providing service to. And if you don't comply by these rules, you will be fined substantially. Unfortunately, we do have a case study where one company was fined £32,000 or 35,000 euros, whatever it is, for failing to make an application. So they are getting stricter. And if we do not have the right documentation, or we haven't notified the country in advance of travel, then we will be liable to fines or worse if we're found to break law. So moving on to the changes. So the changes I'll run through quite quickly. So previously, a posted worker, when they're sent to the EU, usually they remain on their UK employment contract, make things easier. And the time that they can remain on their home employment contract is a period of time a posted worker can remain in a host country whilst remaining on their UK employment contract before having to switch to a local one. So before the duration was 24 months, you could go out to a new country for almost 2 years and still be on your UK employment contract. Now that duration of postings, we like to call it, has been shortened to 12 months. So if you're there for 12 months and you are going to be staying there beyond that, you will have to switch to a local employment contract. There is a possible 6-month extension, but both the UK and the country that you're working will have to approve that. Also, subcontracting chain liability. So manufacturers or companies in general who are part of the subcontracting chain, joint or several, will be liable for any business in that chain that fails to pay the correct remuneration to workers they post. Remuneration, as I said, is the correct payment for a worker. We call it the going rate, but it's the local rate. So an example would be if I was a UK engineer and I was sent to Germany, I've got to be paid the equivalent to that German engineer over there for the duration I'm there. Even if I go for 1 day, I still have to be paid that rate. So again, it's not time sensitive. It's not the amount of stay that protects it. It's the reason you're there. So I could be there 3 months, 1 day. I still have to get paid the correct remuneration. So you will need to find out each member state what that correct payment is and ensure your workers are paid that correct rate. Otherwise, as I said, that subcontracting chain liability will affect you or people in that chain and your customer in that country. So they will also be liable for any wrongdoing. And then agency workers, if anybody uses temporary agencies, they'll get enhanced protection. So the better their terms in the UK, or a local agency workers or a locally directly employed worker. So again, they get bumped up. So you have to meet the equivalent rate for them as well. So enhanced protection for their rights. So a few changes that we all need to be aware of. So it's really, really important we get organised and prepped to see who we're sending, why we're sending, and I'll go into that in a minute. So social security, really, really big issue. I think we're all aware of what it is. So postal workers, if you're a UK employer and you're being sent from the UK to work in the member state, you are naturally going to be covered by the UK social security system. We should all be paying UK national insurance if we're a UK employee. And naturally, you would choose to continue paying UK national insurance even whilst you're there working, because it should be for a shortish amount of time. However, we've got to prove this. Otherwise, we will be liable to pay national insurance in that member state we're visiting. The way to prove this, we must have an A1 form. And this is obtained from HMRC. So you'd go onto the gov.uk website and find the correct A1 form to fill in. It's very, very simple. And you receive it back within a week. And you must carry that with you when you travel. And as part of the advance notification process, you should also be sending a copy in advance as well. This is just to assure the country that you're visiting to that you do pay UK national insurance and you're not liable to pay it national insurance in that country when you visit. So it's a security sort of thing. And that A1 form should be with you always. They are valid generally for 24 months. However, they will need to be updated if you're going to different countries, of course, and different dates. So in your A1 form, you'll need to put the dates that you're there in whatever country you're going to, because it's a very bespoke piece of a form, and every individual will need one. Just to note, business visitors also need an A1 form. It's not just postal workers. That hasn't been made very clear on the gov.uk website, but business visitors, because they're travelling on the matter of business, they will also need an A1 form as well as a postal worker. This is not available for chain postings. Chain postings is when someone goes out and performs a task in that country, and then they're swapped with a colleague who's doing the exact same task in the exact same role. Essentially, if you do that, you need a separate A1 form. So just be aware of that situation there. And moving on. So mapping data, really, really important. This will help you, your company, get prepared for the remainder of this year and next year. So you really need to sort of categorize your workers and see how much preparation you will need to do in advance, such as getting A1 forms or making that advance notification or working out the correct remuneration rate. So volume, how many business trips are taken a year, or postings rather. So a trip is per visit, not per person. So one person traveling to Germany 10 times is 10 trips. It's not just one person going. It's not one trip a year, it's 10. So you need to be careful actually how many visits is taken, because you'll need to do an advance notification for each trip taken. Who's who? So obviously which workers are traveling to member states for visits, or who's going for postings, and what's their occupation. Very important that we know that. Reason for travel. So if you're a business visitor, make sure they're not providing a service. You'll need to say that in your advance notification, i.e. the proof. So hotel bookings, travel receipts, conference and rights. And if you're a postal worker, then obviously you're telling them that you're working for this site in this country and why. And you'll be asked to provide lots of details as well, such as your legal representative contacts and things like that. Length of visit, how long do they stay for? Obviously, if you're a postal worker, duration for more than 12 months, you need to change your contract. As a business visitor, if you're there for more than 180 days, you'll have to notify the authorities for residence authorization, not quite a permit, but you need to apply for that approval. And then obviously which member states do they visit? Because each member state, even though they're bound by this universal member state directive, their national laws do differ on certain things, such as remuneration. There'll be different rates. So really, really make sure you've got all that included when you prepare. So the basic obligations, I'll go through them again in a bit more detail. Advance notification. An employer needs to notify the host country in advance of posting with at least the following information. This is for a posted worker. So they will need the address of the workplace. They'll need the duration of posting. They'll need the contact details for yourselves and the site at which the posted worker is at. They'll want the contact details for the legal representative as well, and any other relevant documentation, such as your work's employment contract, which is not subject to GDPR because it is a legal requirement. So they will need things like that. A copy of the A1 form, as I said. They'll need to know things like VAT number. There'll be a lot of information, a checklist, if you like, that each country will have. Again, it will differ. France has lots, Sweden not so many. So make sure you do find that out. And then this is subject to time limits. So if you are going to make a posting, you can't do it the night before. For example, France has 2 weeks. You've got to make this advance notification within 2 weeks before your workers travel. So do be aware there will be different time limits as well. So this needs to happen for every worker each time they do a posting in an EU country. We do have a lot of support. So how can we help? We do have a guide. We've written a guide on all of this, so much more detail about where you can go for help and what you can do to help yourselves. It will give you links to websites which can give you a head start and where to apply for an A1 form as such. However, we do understand things can be a little difficult, so we actually provide a service as well. We have a 30-minute phone call which you can have with myself or Tim, where we can go through your situation and help you prepare what you need to do and where you're going, what the requirements are. I must add that remuneration is a tricky element, which requires extensive research and knowledge about EU law in order to comply with. So we are here to help, and we do have a service. So please do get in touch if you require that. And I will now hand back to Tim to do some polling questions.
Thanks very much, Alice, for that great overview of what the current rules are. Now, you should see on your screen a couple of polling questions that we've put up. Let me just run through them. COVID and Brexit aside, how frequently do you send or plan to send a UK-based worker to the EU, EEA or Switzerland? That's an EU country, Switzerland or Norway, for example, as a business visitor or a posted worker in the next 12 months. So ignoring COVID and Brexit, normally, how frequently would you plan to send a worker of any type, business visitor or posted worker, to the EU? And you've got 3 potential options there. You've got frequently, occasionally, or almost never. And we've got a second polling question as well. Taking into account the information just provided by Alice, how prepared is your company now when it comes to complying with these rules? So do you think you're fully prepared, quite unprepared, or very unprepared? So 2 questions there that we'll ask you to vote on. The polling questions for your votes are open now. So if you give you a few moments to answer those 2 questions for us, then we'll see the results, and then we'll see, I'll look at them, and then we'll have some commentary from our panel. So those questions should be open for you to vote on now, using the buttons on your screen. And if you could do that, then we'll, I say, come back to our panel and look at to see how you have voted. So run through them again. COVID and Brexit aside, how frequent do you send or plan to send a UK-based worker to EU, EEA or Switzerland as a business visitor or a posted worker in the next year? And given what you've just heard of, how prepared do you think your company is when complying with the rules that Alice has just taken you through, ranging from fully prepared to very unprepared? So just a few more seconds for that polling question, hoping to remain open, those 2 questions, and for you to have a chance to vote and give your views. So we will pause there for a moment and give you all a couple more seconds to vote on those questions, and then hopefully in a second we will be able to see the results of the poll. As you see from Alice, those are quite technical rules within the EU that you need to comply with. The social security, there's telling the country in advance that you're sending a worker. There's that tricky remuneration calculation that Alice mentioned, and there's the fact that you've also got to get this social security form to make sure you're paying UK social security contributions, and then there's the unfortunate side that compliance with the rules carries greater enforcement in the EU at the moment, and also if you don't comply, there's the potential for some enforcement action. So there we go, the results are on the screen now. Let's just have a quick look. So polling question 1, 60% said they're going to be sending workers frequently, 41% occasionally, no one almost never. And on the second question, one person said they were fully prepared, quite prepared, quarter, quite unprepared, the bulk, and very unprepared, 10% or so. Now, I'm just going to come back to Alice at this point for Alice's reaction. Alice has been speaking to lots of Make UK members about that. Alice, do those results bear out the conversations you've been having with Make UK members at the moment? Does that reflect what you've been hearing on the calls I know you've been having?
Yes, it does. So most members, to no fault of their own, haven't really been aware of these rules in the first place, let alone any increased enforcement of them since July this year. I think members have been very used to just sending their workers to the EU, popping them on a plane in the Eurostyle with no other thoughts about it, particularly because it hasn't really been shouted from the rooftops, these rules. It was notified 2 years ago, but I don't think it's had much pick up. So I'm not surprised that the majority of them are quite unprepared. There is a lot of things to do, but hopefully Make UK can provide that support and service to our members. But I'm not surprised that not many people are prepared due to the low level of awareness.
Thanks, Alice. We're going to press on with the presentation now. I will move the slides forward. Bear with me. There we go. So I'm going to take you through something called the Schengen Visa waiver scheme. I'll hand back to Alice. That'll take you through the future immigration system. I'll do this in fairly quick time in the interest of getting everything to the webinar before we come to Adam and Dave. So why is this thing called the Schengen Visa waiver scheme important? Because in December 2020, the current EU arrangement ends. UK workers have no automatic right to work in the EU. The ability to do so is governed by each individual member state. So is the requirement to pay national insurance, that's up to each member state. Member states might require work permits for UK business visitors or posted workers, and each member state can't grant essentially a special deal to the UK. So as a mitigation measure, the EU has indicated it would add UK nationals to this waiver scheme and publish some draft regulations. What it allows you to do is a 90-day rolling stay in any 180-day period, where essentially it means you can enter the Schengen area as part of the EU visa-free. It's subject to entry requirements, and if you're outside the EU for 90 days, that entitles you to another EU entitlement. So a brief rundown on the Schengen visa waiver scheme. It allows you visa-free travel, doesn't mean to say that you don't have to have a work permit locally. More information if you need that from Make UK. And I'll briefly hand back to Alice, who will now take you through just the headlines of the future UK immigration system.
Thanks, Tim. So less about us going to the EU, more everyone else coming into the UK. So as we know, there's a brand new UK immigration system coming into force 1st of January next year. There are detailed UK rules that have just been published, all 500 pages of them. As we all know, it's going to be a point-based system, so points will be required in all skilled routes. Health surcharge and skill surcharge has now doubled, and there are salary and skill thresholds as well. Intra-company transfer rules have changed. So under the Tier 2 visa route, which we could all be familiar with, it's the main route in, there's an ICT route as well, and there are new rules for them as well. As we know, freedom of movement with the EU is now stopped, so this now applies to everyone, non-EU, EU citizens. They will all be in the same bucket coming in. So quickly going through. Salary and qualification thresholds. So originally, the new salary threshold was going to be 30,000. They're very high for some occupations in our sector. Make UK were part of the lobbying campaign to lower this. What came out of that was 25,600. So that's the minimum salary needed to be earned or offered as part of recruitment in order to come into the UK. However, if a job role is offered to someone from abroad and it's higher than 25,600, you then got to add on the going rate on top of that. So what you do, if you advertise a job for £30,000, for example, you'd calculate 25% of that and add that on top, and that new sum is your new salary threshold for that individual. So it's a little bit on extra each time, and that has to be calculated for that occupation. And then the qualification threshold has been reduced from level 3, A level, from level 6, degree level. So before you'd had to have degree level to come in, now the minimum threshold is A level. But of course, when you offer a job, it's got to be at the required skill level. So obviously a managing director will have to have the relevant qualifications for that job. Skilled workers. So this is the main route in. There are other routes as well, such as students, a bespoke visa route for NHS staff or entrepreneurs. There's a tier 1 route, which is exceptional talent. So essentially PhD graduates or those who have startups and are in the exceptional talent route. That is capped. And then finally, the tier 2 route, which is going to be the main point of entry for most people into the UK from now on, has now been rebranded the skilled worker route. Again, requires a total of 70 points to come to work and live in the UK. So all applicants, EU and non-EU, will need a job offer from an approved sponsor. So our message to employers now is, if you're planning to recruit later this year or now, get a sponsorship license. You will need one. Otherwise, you cannot offer a job outside of the UK. That's your first 20 points if you get a job offer from an approved sponsor. Second 20 points, job offer is at required skill level. So as I said before, the job you offer has got to obviously meet the skill level required. And then for another 10 points, can speak English well. There will be an English test throughout the process of the system. And then, as I said before, a minimum of 25,600 or above, another 20 points. So that'll take you up to 70. Now, if you want to recruit abroad and the role does not quite earn 25,600 a year, there are two alternatives. There's a list called the Shortage Occupation List, which was consulted by organisations such as Make UK and other employer organisations to identify which occupations are in shortage and are vital to the UK economy, but don't quite meet that 25,600 threshold. Therefore, if a job role is on this list, then they don't have to earn that threshold. They can earn the base rate, which is 20,480. So the base rate, 20,480, is the lowest threshold there is, but only applies if the job role is on that shortage occupation list. And that will get you the 20 points required. If it's not on the list and the job role still doesn't earn £25,600, then if they have a PhD in STEM, that will bypass the threshold as well, and they can earn those 20 points and come in as well. So different sort of rules here. Points apply to all routes, including intra-company transfers. So if you're having a secondment come to the UK as well, they will also, these points will also apply to them as well. And there's a higher salary threshold for a secondee or intra-company transfer of about £41,000 a year. That's a minimum salary threshold for a secondee. So some rules have changed. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. I'm going to pause the presentation there, and we're going to go to our panel. for a few comments and views. I'm going to go to Dave first of all. Dave Benstead. Dave, thank you very much for joining us today again. Most grateful. Dave, Diode's major global and UK manufacturer. Lots of people that are mobile and need to be mobile, need to move. I know you've got lots of customers in the EU. These rules you've heard of today, and looking ahead to next year, they could change and potentially put barriers, increased barriers between workers in the UK traveling to the EU. What's your take as a manufacturer, Dave? First of all, how do you think most manufacturers are currently getting on complying with these rules? And looking ahead, what would be the position if there were barriers that prevented workers traveling between the UK and the EU?
Okay, Tim. I've got to say, in the 25 years that I've been involved with Diodes, we are a global business, as you say, and we've got about just over 800 people in Europe, 2 manufacturing facilities in the UK, 1 in Germany, and we've got offices around Italy, Germany, France, etc. I've got to be honest and say, whilst we might fully understand what the rules are we ever going to be fully prepared? I've got to say no, and I'll explain why I'm making that statement. In the 25 years traveling around Europe, I would say we've treated Europe as one country. We've gone from the UK to Germany to Italy to France to Switzerland and every other country you can think of with little or no restrictions. Have we been aware of the rules that have been enforced over that time? Yes. Have they been enforced? No. Has that causes any problems? Not at all. I would say that over the time, travel around Europe has got easier. Whether that's because of the passports that we have or just coming into the country at border control, it's been very easy. We've got a whole range of different types of roles within the business: marketing, sales, different engineering functions, and we have all traveled freely. We've been to conferences, we've been to business meetings, we've seen customers, and we've never experienced any problems whatsoever. Have we complied with the A1 form requirements? No, we're not a business that tries to work around the law. We've got good governance and we comply. Mm-hmm. It just hasn't been necessary. And are the new rules going to cause us a problem? Absolutely. I go back to what I said before. We fully understand everything we're required to do. We fully understand the rules. We've worked with colleagues at Make UK to make sure that everybody in our business does understand the rules. Are we fully prepared? No. And the reason why we'll never be fully prepared is because of the way the operation works. We have constantly installing capital equipment, and that capital equipment is sourced globally, but a lot of the equipment is sourced around Europe. And engineers come across and they will install that equipment for us. Inevitably, we'll have teething problems with it. There'll be repairs necessary. We run 24/7. 365 days a year. If a piece of equipment goes down, we want an engineer on site within hours to repair that. That isn't planned. We expect somebody from one of our suppliers to get on a plane, come across and get us back online. If we're not back online within a matter of hours, we're creating problems for our customers globally. The nature of the product as a semiconductor, it's a very long supply chain. A lot of our business goes into automotive. We can't afford to stop production lines at all. And that said, if a customer, one of our customers, says to us, we want you to come across, we might have a quality problem. And it's inevitable you get quality problems in almost every product. We want you on a plane, we want you on a plane. You're lucky if you get ours. We want you now. To be able to plan for that is going to be nigh on impossible. It just doesn't work. Conferences, yes. We can plan for conferences. They may be months in advance. They might be in a year's time or 2 years' time. And if we have to plan for air tickets, and we have to plan for hotels and get ourselves organised into one hotel in one city. We can do that, and complying with the rules is going to be no different from that. Conferences, yes. Sales meetings, to a certain extent, yes, we can plan for those and we can comply with the rules. But as I say, that's just a small fraction of the business. Having the agility to be able to respond to our customers' demands and for our suppliers to respond to our demands is, you can't plan for that. You need to react, and that's going to create so much difficulty for us.
Thank you, Dave. So sounds like where you can plan, you will. So conferences, sales meetings, etc. It's the short-term, unplanned nature, the reactive nature. It's serving your customers in the EU that these barriers could cause you some great difficulty with. Thanks very much for your reflections there, Dave. Is there anything you'd like to add before I move on to Adam?
Nothing further, Tim, apart from I just wish we could remain in Europe.
I think there's many of our members that and many businesses that might share that view. Adam, I turn to you now. So clearly these rules could cause issues, difficulties for businesses like Dave's and other UK manufacturers. They're technical rules. What's your take on these rules, how they could change in the future, and what might Ceridian be able to do to help our members?
Absolutely. So just to introduce what Ceridian is. So Ceridian as a global HCM supplier of both pay and time solutions, as well as learning platform, benefits, tracking, and so forth. We see this internationally. So one thing about rules is they constantly change. They don't stay the same for very long. So especially as you've seen in the last 2 years about the A1 rules changing and future changes coming in January, these are similar to what we've seen in North America and Asia as different work permits have changed. And even our relationship between Canada and the United States changes on a constant basis in the last 4 years, and that changes how we have to track information. So it really comes down to understanding all your HR requirements under one solution, we feel. Tracking the individual performance of your employees is great, but now because of these work requirements, you have to also understand the true impact of their education, making sure that information is accurate and collecting it. So you can determine, first thing, if they're a level 6 employee or above in terms of their education and how that's going to affect your work permit applications. And when you actually go about tracking the employee's time, it's essential that you kind of upgrade beyond an Excel-based employee tracking spreadsheet. And what we've seen at with Dayforce is that by having all the information in one place, by having the understanding of who your employees are, what their education, what their background is in terms of how they can travel, then combining that with a workforce management software where you can understand when they travel, which jurisdictions they are, how many hours or days they're working in that jurisdiction. So you can track what are the requirements, what are the pay, and making sure they're compensated properly. So as Alice mentioned, you're not fined eventually because you're not compliant, but also making sure that when you go about this process, you are following the legal requirements so that future workers or future business trips are not impacted by any kinds of fines or misunderstandings along the process. So again, that really comes down to understanding your employees as the first element, who they are and what their education. But then when they go out and actually do the travel, it really needs to be detailed. It really needs to be tracked, and it needs to be able to be supplied in a way that is easy to access, especially when you're completing the A1 forms. The difficulty there would become an administration overload if you have to go through paper records, Excel files, Word files, going around interviewing your employees on an ad hoc basis. By collecting that information in one depository ahead of time that you can use to manage your day-to-day operations anyway, you're able to shorten that cycle of completing the requirements for the work permits. Also, mapping out that data in the future. By understanding the roles and responsibilities and education of your employees, you're able to figure out what your travel may look like in the next 12 months. And that's very difficult for a lot of employers to do. Where are my employees going to travel 11, 12 months from now? if there's anything we've learned in COVID, it's you can't really plan 3 to 4 months in advance until the vaccine is distributed and implemented. So the way to try to shorten that cycle, if you're not able to already know your travel schedule for the next 12 months, is to be able to have this information accessible quickly on hand so that the paperwork and requirements can be completed on the fly. And then understanding the workers' contracts, whether it's your own workers here in the UK or as they travel through the EU, understanding the individual jurisdictions' contracts and how that impacts pay, benefits, and anything else. And it's really, we understand just a little bit right now, but as the relationship between the UK and the EU continues to evolve over the next couple of years under these new restrictions, new rules will come in. And through Dayforce, you're able to start tracking the information that you need to identify to work with these new rules. By staying with obsolete systems that are often paper-based or disconnected, every time there's a rule change, you have to go back to your data and kind of reinvent your process. By starting off with a single source of data, collecting that profile of your employees, especially when they're hired, would be great. Let alone when they're just about to travel. You're able to shorten the cycle. And when you're often talking about supplying products to other jurisdictions that you maybe have to even be on a plane for a couple hours, like Dave needs a response, and you're finding yourself in that situation where in a couple hours you need to be on one of your employees needs to be on a plane, the work permit needs to be issued, or it has to have been done in advance as a preemptive step. Having that information ready to go on the fly is really essential, and it really requires a modern human capital management system. And then what we would recommend as the next action steps, regardless if you use Dayforce or not, is to really start collecting this information about your employees. Put in a central depository, map out your travel for the next 12 months if possible. And if you're not able to really map out what that travel would look like, and if it's going to be consistent or reliable, is really focus on the first step, collecting all the information that you would need for these forms and kind of one step above. What else do you think would ultimately be required in terms of certifications or any other kind of information about your employees that you have readily on hand to complete the work permit process? Also, we think it's really important to educate the actual employees that are possibly expected to travel on what this would look like. Why are we collecting this information? What is it going to be used for? And why is it important that they can continue to supply that up-to-date information with yourselves? Because it's very difficult if you have to educate them on the spot. It can be disheartening. Why do I have to supply this information? Am I going to be in trouble if I cross the border? It's kind of relieve the stress on the employees themselves by showing that there is a robust system with robust tools behind the scenes that make this process possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Some really well made points there. As we heard from Alice, from the conversations Alice has had with our members, clearly getting that data, as you say, Adam, is extremely important. Having that data in accessible format, particularly if you're sending people, as Dave said, at short notice. If you've got an urgent request to send someone, having that data to hand, you won't have time to go and search for it or find it. It could be in a few different places in the business. So one platform there, Adam, where you've got all that data to hand that Alice was referring to, sounds like it's something that's going to be vital to manufacturers and all UK businesses going forward.
Absolutely. And it's often very difficult to collect all this information on a short-term basis. I personally have applied for many work permits in my lifetime, and it's always this race to find out the scans or photocopies of my degrees, sometimes transcripts of my university marks going back 20-something years, things that I don't typically keep in an organized manner. But if you know that these are requirements of a work permit process that's designed by the government, whatever the intentions are, then it's probably great to get ahead, because in the moment, especially with some of these requirements being defined paperwork that may be several decades old in order to prove your educational level, may be difficult to do in a couple of hours. It may take a week or two to reliably get the employees to collect it.
I think that's a really good tip there, Anton, to make sure that you are prepared for these rules and to make sure that all that bulk of information is readily available in a format that you can access quickly, and also in a format actually you can update. Because it may be that, as Alice said, these rules are changing. Dave needs to send people quickly to the EU. So actually, you might need to make sure that the information is readily accessible and updated week by week, month by month in some cases. Alice was explaining that tricky remuneration calculation. As people's pay changes, as these remuneration rules change, access to that sort of platform, Adam, that you referred to, is going to be absolutely vital. Thanks very much for your reflections there, Adam. I'm going to now move on. We're going to look at some questions that have come in. I'm going to pop the questions around. I'm going to pop some questions over to Alice to begin with, and then try and answer a few myself. So let's see what's come in. Alice, the first question to you that's come in. If we have an employee who only visits a subsidiary company for meetings on an infrequent basis, do we still need to provide advance notification? So this is sounds like this is an intra-company transferee going from the UK to the EU. They're going in frequently, but it's still an ICT. And the question is, do we still need to notify, and do we still need a social security form?
Absolutely. So A1 forms apply to anyone traveling to EU for any matter of business, whether you are visiting or you're actually a secondee, an intra-company transfer, doing some work. So yes, you do need your social security form, an A1 form. And yes, you still need to notify the country in advance, because you are traveling there on behalf of your company to conduct business, whether in a meeting or not. So yes to both of those.
Thanks. Again, Alice, if you don't mind, I'll pop the next one over to you as well. So a question that's come in: any special emergency processes where a customer demands an engineer to be on site within 48 hours? The sort of thing that we heard from Dave. This sounds like it's, again, a UK, perhaps a technician or a UK engineer responding to a customer demand. They've got to be in the EU pretty quickly, by the sounds of it, within 48 hours. Sounds like they're a posted worker providing a service. How does the customer, the member, go about dealing with that?
Yeah, this is a very common query. Everyone has last minute meetings or requirements to be in the EU at 48 hours notice or even less. It really is preparation. I think the message the EU is sending us loud and clear is to get organised. No longer can we have these last minute things. Although they will still happen, if you are organised in advance, if you've got a group of workers who are the frequent travellers, get everything sorted for them now. Get their A1 forms, you know, get all the information on the system. You know their roles aren't going to change hugely between now and then. If you know the countries they usually travel to, get that checklist up. Make sure you've got all the requirements in advance. So if they are going at 48 hours notice, a bit like Adam was saying, have something at hand so that when you do have to make the advance notification, you're not spending hours finding everything. So if you are correctly prepared and organised, it shouldn't be too hard. As long as you make that advance notification before they land in that country, you've made it. So they could still be on the plane, but as long as when they land, you've notified that country in advance, they've got their A1 form, that's the best you can do, and you are complying. But if you have those documents in advance and you know the group of workers who are travelling, you can find out the remuneration rates before they even go. They may not be going to Germany, but at least you've had that information at hand before. So the answer is be prepared. So when it does come to a last notice thing, you're not flailing about trying to find things. You've got it in front of you already.
Thanks, Alice. And again, brings home the importance of what Adam was saying about getting the information in one place, and also what Dave was saying about these short-term trips, how important they are, but they're going to need clearly more planning in the future. I'm going to take the next question, which has come in, which is, are we able to register, I think that probably means pre-register, all business visitors and posted workers now ahead of the coming year? We don't yet know when or where they will travel. Well, the answer is, unfortunately, no, you can't, because it's that notification procedure that Alice was explaining. It is individual to each worker you send, to each country you send them. And when you send the worker, you need to provide information that Alice was explaining. So you need to conduct that remuneration calculation, which will be relevant, of course, to that particular window where you are sending them. The information that you provide is time sensitive. You've got to tell the authorities where you're sending that worker exactly where they're going and when they're going and when they're coming back. So what you can't do is a bulk notification to say we are sending people generally to the EU for over the coming year. And those notifications that Alice has been explaining are to each individual member state. So if the worker is going to France for a period in February, that's one notification. If they're going to Germany in March, that's another notification. And these are individual to these particular countries. So you couldn't, for example, just notify the EU generally that you're sending workers. You need to notify each individual country. Quite understand why the question's being asked, but unfortunately, that's not a possibility. And you do have this degree of administration. We heard from Dave what the impact that's going to be that you need to comply with. The next question I'm going to fire back to Alice. Now, this is a question on the UK's future immigration system. You heard some details from Alice about that earlier on. So this question is about EU workers. It's about workers who are comparatively lower skilled, but also perhaps lower paid. So these would be workers perhaps that don't have a level 3 and A level type qualification. They may be lower paid, and they may be below those thresholds you heard about from Alice under the future immigration system. So the question, Alice, is how do UK employers in the future get access to low-skilled workers under the points-based system? Or perhaps the question actually should be, can UK workers get access to those low-skilled workers under the points-based system in the future?
So the two answer thing here. So at the moment, we've got the EU settlement scheme, and that provides or continues the right to work and live in the UK if you're an EU citizen and already had been here. So if you've been here for less than 5 years, you get pre-settle status, and if you've been here for more than 5 years, you get settled status. And these are for sort of existing EU citizens in our country and continues their right to work and live here. So if you're planning to recruit someone from outside the UK between now and January, my advice would be bring them here and get them on the EU settlement scheme and apply for pre-settled status, so you don't have to go through the future immigration system via those routes. Of course, applications don't finish until June, so you actually still got some time to do that. But if that's not an option for you and you are recruiting from a non-EU country, obviously they can't apply under the EU settlement scheme, then unfortunately there is no lower skilled route. However, because it's lower paid, there are two other options. So if they don't meet that minimum salary threshold, if their job is on the shortage occupation list, which we can provide links to, then they bypass that minimum threshold and their new threshold is base rate, 20,480. That is the lowest salary threshold offered for a lower skilled or rather a lower paid worker. And unfortunately, if the occupation is neither on that list and they don't earn the 25,000, then the only other route in via the new immigration system is for them to have a PhD in a STEM subject.
Thanks very much, Alice. Clearly a completely different system going forward. I'm going to pause with the questions. We're nearly out of time. What I would say on the questions is that we've had quite a few in that we've not got round to today. As you heard from Carolee at the outset, we will be taking all those questions and we'll make sure that we do answer them and provide you with the correct information in a timely fashion and make sure that we come back to you on each and every. I can see there's questions about A1 forms, advanced notifications, some questions again about emergency trips into the EU, questions about apprentices, questions about training, questions about checking settled status and that settled status information, a question about how long ahead you need to notify, is it always 2 weeks? The questions about EU visitors coming to the UK next year, those future immigration rules, 500 pages you heard from Alice. Those are just a sample of questions that we've had in. We will come back to you all with answers and make sure that they're posted as part of this piece of work. I now need to thank our panelists today. Huge thanks to Alice for explaining all these technical rules. Thank you to Adam as well for explaining how Ceridian can help, the importance of having your data in order. Thank you very much, Dave, for taking the time out to explain the importance of a manufacturer's perspective of all these technical rules. We will be making sure that this is recorded. We'll make sure you have a copy of the recording Also, we'll recirculate the fact cards and also some useful links to the Make UK website, and we will come back with answers to all your questions. Look out in the future for some more information from Make UK. We're planning to have a series of roadshows next month that will also cover the future immigration system and what you're going to need to do to plan for January of next year. So more information coming all the time. And remember, when you see the recording and slides, there was some links and also an email address. So if you need to get in touch with Make UK and you need further information, please let us know. One last thanks to Alice and Adam and Dave for contributing to this webinar. Thank you to you for joining as well. Stay in touch with Make UK. If you've got questions, fire them through to the email address that you saw further on. And in the background, huge thanks to Carol Lee for all her help, without which we could never have put this on. So thank you again for joining. Great to meet you all, at least virtually. Stay safe during COVID times, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.